Hello, welcome back to the channel. This is the second half of my absurd, unhinged book haul. These are going to be the fiction books that I've hauled recently for myself, and there are not nearly as many as there were in the nonfiction book haul, thank goodness. A, for my wallet, and B, for my voice as I'm filming this back to back with the first haul. If you happen to have read any of these books, I would love to hear about it in the comments, or if any of them pique your interest. If you're new here, hi, my name is Lillian. I love talking about books, nuances of storytelling, and the craft of writing. And if you enjoyed today's video, I would love to have you subscribe and stick around. So without further ado, let's get on into the books, shall we? Starting off, we have a short story collection that was a favorite of mine last winter, maybe 2 winters ago. I can't remember off the top of my head. Either way, this is Christmas Days, 12 Stories and 12 Feasts for 12 Days by Jeanette Winterson. This is a lovely hardback edition, although it is a former library copy and I'm scared to try and get this sticker off. When I originally read this, I listened to this as an audiobook going on some winter walks, which was absolutely beautiful and would highly recommend it. The audiobook itself is narrated by the author, Jeanette Winterson. This is one that I knew that in the end I wanted to own a physical copy of so that I could dip in and out of. Planning on revisiting this and also likely the audiobook this winter season. The stories themselves in this collection are both wonderful and haunting. Quite a few of them actually involve ghosts. Whether you do or don't celebrate Christmas for religious reasons, I feel like there is something for everyone to take away from this collection. Next we have The Wide Sargasso Sea by Rhys. All of the books in this haul I purchased off of thrift books. Not sponsored whatsoever, but in doing so I ended up getting some really gorgeous covers. This is among them. This book was originally published in 1966 and is now, I believe, considered a modern classic. In it, Rhys is bringing to life the mad woman in the attic from Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. Quote, "This mesmerizing work introduces us to Antoinette Cosway, a sensual and protected young woman who is sold into marriage to the prideful Mr. Rochester. Rhys portrays Cosway amidst a society so driven by hatred, so skewed in its sexual relations, that it can literally drive a woman out of her mind." This is definitely going on my summer reading list for sure. Another slim volume that I have my eye on for the summer, this is The Vagabond by Colette. This book was originally published in 1910 and my copy is translated from the French by Aaand McLeod. This is, quote, an account of a young woman striving to keep control of her life in the face of her own awakening desires, a failed marriage, and the attentions of a wealthy suitor. This is a book that I found in the recommended to you because you've been browsing these books section of thrift books, a dangerous place to be, and the title and description are what initially drew me in. This is a debut novel that came out in 2010. Have I said the title of this book? No, I'm just very excited about it. This is Sub Rosa by Amber Dawn. In it, Dawn is reportedly subverting the traditional hero's quest adventure to create a dark post-feminist version, which was really all I needed to know about this book in order to pick it up, but the subsequent description also definitely made me very excited to pick it up. Sub Rosa's reluctant heroine is a teenage runaway named Little. She stumbles upon an underground society of ghosts and musicians, missing girls, and would-be Johns, a place called Sub Rosa. Not long after she is initiated into this family of magical prostitutes, Little is called upon to lead them through a maze of feral darkness, a calling burdened with grotesque enemies, strange allies, and memories from a foggy past. Sub Rosa is a beautiful, gutsy, and fantastical allegory for our times. Really looking forward to hopefully getting to this book this summer. The Weimar period in Germany between the First and the Second World War has really caught my attention recently and wanted to delve deeper into some of the literature that was being published during that time within Germany. This is Little Man, What Now by Hans Fallada. It was originally published in 1933 and my copy is translated from the German by Susan Bennett. I'll read you a little bit of the back. Written just before the Nazis came to power, this darkly enchanting novel tells the simple story of a young couple trying to eke out a decent life amidst the economic crisis that's transforming their country to a place of anger and despair. It was an international bestseller upon its release and made into a Hollywood movie, which prompted the rising Nazis to begin paying ominously close attention to Hans Fallada even as his novels held out, stirring hope for the human spirit. I hadn't heard of this book before coming across it on thrift books, and it definitely grabbed my attention. Next is a favorite read of mine from 2020. I initially listened to The Confessions of Frannie Langton by Sarah Collins as an audiobook. It was in fact the first audiobook that I ever listened to, and I've wanted my own copy since. So saw this on thrift books for a good price and I picked it up. Without giving too much away, this is a historical sapphic thriller set in both Georgian England as well as on a sugar plantation in Jamaica, where our main character grew up. Frannie Langton, our protagonist, is a servant and a former enslaved person who has been accused of murdering her employer and his wife. I remember being enthralled by this story and very much on the edge of my seat for the entire time. There is a delicious sense of unsettling tension woven throughout and drawn beautifully throughout this book. The time period in which this is set in is one that I hadn't come across in historical fiction before, so it was really eye-opening and interesting to read about it from this character's perspective. There are definitely also poignant elements of social commentary in this book and definitely some heavy subject matter. So if you are interested in picking up this book, I would recommend looking up some content warnings if that's something that you are one to do. A Spy in the House of Love by Anais Nin. Anais Nin is an author that I have been intrigued to try out recently, so I grabbed a copy of her novel. This was originally published in 1954. Anais Nin herself was a very interesting person, arguably writing about topics and themes that were rather ahead of her time, namely to do with sexuality and women's position within society. She was mainly a diarist, and a good number of things that she was mostly writing about in her diary would, shall we say, not be socially acceptable to have published during her day. So she ended up distilling some of those writings into this novel. A Spy in the House of Love, whose heroine Sabina is deeply divided between her drive for artistic and sexual expression on the one hand and social restrictions and self-created inhibitions on the other, echoes Nin's personal struggles with sex, love, and emotional fragmentation. Written when Nin's life was taut with conflicting loyalties, her protagonist, Sabina, repeatedly asks herself, can one indulge one's sensual restlessness, the fantasies, the relentless need for adventure without devastating consequences? Despite what the title of this book might suggest, the vast majority of this story is reportedly written about and set in Budapest, Hungary. This is Prague by Arthur Phillips. Not entirely sure why he titled it that. We'll see once I get to this. Knowing that it was largely set in Budapest is in large part why I picked this book up. I lived in the city for several months in 2016, and my partner and I recently took a wonderful vacation there. So I'm sort of wanting to continue that experience of being in the city through fictional form. In this, we are apparently following 5 American expats who came to Budapest in the early 1990s to seek their fortune. And that's the bulk of what I know about this book, other than the fact that it's set in Budapest. So hoping to sort of keep it that way going into it, and yeah, we'll see how this one goes. Even Cowgirls Get the Blues by Tom Robbins. This is another one where the title drew me in, and the description, while skimming it, was enough for me to buy it. This originally came out in the 1970s, I believe, and the part of the description that I skimmed that made it a no-brain purchase for me is that something about cowgirls and road trips. And that's really all that I needed, plus this great title. So if you've read this one, definitely let me know what you thought of it. Next, we have Confessions of an English Opium Eater by Thomas de Quincey. This was originally published in 1821, and I picked it up after hearing Dakota Warren speak about it in one of her book videos. Controversial, but an arguably classic autobiographical depiction of the author's own struggles with addiction to opium and the terror and power of the human imagination. I've heard some interesting things about this book, and I'm intrigued to see how I find it. Another modern classic, we have Ceremony by Leslie Marmon Silko. This came out in 1986 and I believe has since been hailed as a modern classic. Teo, a young Native American, has been a prisoner of the Japanese during World War II, and the horrors of captivity have almost eroded his will to survive. His return to the Laguna Pueblo reservation only increases his feelings of estrangement and alienation, while other returning soldiers find easy refuge in alcohol and senseless violence. Teo searches for another kind of comfort and resolution. Teo's quest leads him back to the Indian past and its traditions, to beliefs about witchcraft and evil, and to the ancient stories of his people. The search itself becomes a ritual, a curative ceremony that defeats the most virulent of afflictions, despair. I've had several people recommend this book to me over the years, and I figured that now was a good time to pick it up. The next book is one that, wait for it, is still in transit to me, but I wanted to mention it in this haul. Transit by Anais Seghers came out in 1944, and my copy is translated from the German by Margot Betuer-Dembo. Apologies if I mispronounced that. In it, we are following a nameless 27-year-old German who has recently escaped from a Nazi concentration camp in Germany in 1937. Amidst his escape, he's asked to deliver a letter to a man named Vidal in Paris. Once our narrator arrives in Paris, though, we find that Vidal is dead and has left behind a manuscript in a suitcase. This book is reportedly an existential, political, and literary thriller that explores the agonies of boredom, the vitality of storytelling, and the plight of the exile with extraordinary compassion and insight based on the book description. And I'm definitely curious to check this book out once it arrives. But that is it, my friends. Those are the fiction books that I've recently picked up in my sort of stress-induced fugue of book buying. But again, let me know if you have read any of these books, if any of these books are on your radar or piqued your interest. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. But with that, I'm going to wrap up this video. I hope you all are doing well, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.